Welcome to the Coven Chat.
Thank you for joining me here at the Maiden Circle Coven Chat podcast, where we talk all things witchy, spiritual, and human.
Hello, merry meet, and welcome to the Coven Chat. Thank you so much for joining me. This week we are talking about numerology. I love numerology. It's one of my favorite subjects. I use numbers in all of my readings. You may have noticed that I am often noticing the numbers of the cards, and I think a lot about how the numbers affect the message on the card. I've also always just been a fan of numbers. Math was one of my best subjects in grade school, and I've always been fascinated by the concept of numbers and how essentially our entire society, our planet is run with numbers. I'll get a little more into that in the musing, but I wanted to start this episode off with another poem reading. This is a poem by my favorite long-gone poet, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I've shared some of her work before, and when I was a kid, I don't remember where I got it, but I had this huge book full of her poems, and she was probably my first introduction to poetry. This poem in particular is probably the first of hers that I heard, and I didn't hear the real poem the first time. What I heard was Roger Rabbit saying, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. A 1, a 2, a 3. And that has always stuck with me. It's one of my favorite movies. So of course I have seen it at least 100 times. And then when I read the real poem in that book, there was a sort of spark in my brain. It brought two things that I love together: literature, poetry, the word, and movies and animation. So because of that sort of crossover, this poem has always held a special place in my heart. On top of the personal thing, it's just a beautiful poem, and the sentiment that it expresses is, well, I'll let you decide how to feel about it, but I think it's very special. So here is Sonnet 43, How Do I Love Thee, by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach, when feeling out of sight for ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candle light. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. I love thee with a passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seemed to lose. With my lost saints, I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. I could read this poem 100 different times in 100 different ways and still find something new to think about it. I encourage you to look it up and read it yourself so that you can feel and hear it in your own voice, in your own power. So let's move on to our fun fact of the day.
Pagan fun fact. Here's your fun facts now.
So, as this week is about numerology, I of course have been thinking a lot about numbers and the history of numbers, and I started thinking about how all of society is run on numbers and where they came from. As I was thinking about these things, I remembered something from my own work. As some of you may know, I am a fiction writer as well as a spiritual creator, and I have a novel called Lullaby of the Lilitu, and within that novel there is a character named Cayenne. Cayenne is one of the oldest beings in the book, and he comes from ancient Assyria, which is somewhere in the Middle East where ancient Mesopotamia and Sumer used to exist. He comes from the Akkadian Empire, and in doing research to build his character, I learned a lot about Sumer and Mesopotamia and the earliest civilizations here on Earth. The first known true civilization on Earth, the Sumerians, they developed a number system, and from that, the Greeks were able to develop their number system. The rest of the Middle East developed their number system, and all of that developed into what we use today. On top of developing the earliest number system, they also had the earliest system of religion or organized religion, and at one point they are known to have had up to 3,000 different gods. There were gods throughout Sumer based on where you were. There were gods for different things, household things. There may have been gods for each different house even. Out of those 3,000 gods and goddesses, out of those 3,000 deities, there were 7 main deities that were sometimes called the 7 gods who decree. According to Twinkle.com, those gods were named An, who was the king of the gods. He was heaven, he was the sky god, he was the stars, he was the father of all demons and monsters, and he was the patron god of their city Uruk. Then there was Enlil, the god of wind, storms, air, and earth. If you're comparing him to the Greek pantheon, he may hold a place like Zeus. So if you have ever seen the movie The Craft, you may remember a scene where they speak of a deity named Manon. Manon was created for that movie. He was not a real known god. He was in fact written for that movie, but the way he is described is as everything. The sky, the heavens. He is the football field that God and the devil would play in, is what she said. And that's almost how we can describe An. And Lil would be more, again, like Zeus, as the head of the council of gods. Then we had Enki, the god of water, knowledge, magic, mischief, arts, and the crafts. He was believed to have brought us art and science. Then we have Ninhursag, the goddess of fertility and mother goddess of Sumer. You could compare her to Gaia in the Greek pantheon. Then we have Nana. He was the god of the moon and could predict the future at each full moon. We have Utu. He was the god of the sun, justice, truth, and morality. He's compared here to the Egyptian god Ra, as he was believed to ride through the sky in a sun chariot. Then we have Utu's twin sister Inanna. She is the goddess name that will probably be most familiar to many of you because she is in the Wiccan chant of the goddess. You may have heard it in all sorts of places and all sorts of rituals when a few goddesses will be named, like Isis, Astarte, Diana, Hecate, Inanna. You may have heard her if you've participated in rituals that have called upon the many goddesses. She is the goddess of love, beauty, desire, fertility, war, and justice. She's known for trying to conquer the underworld and failing. There were more Mesopotamian and Sumerian gods and goddesses, of course, that we know by name now. Maiden Circle actually has a divine name for the goddess that comes from Sumer, and it's a name that is only shared to official members of the coven, but it does have its origins in the Sumerian Mesopotamian gods. We think of these religions and these gods as ancient and old and dead. And they may be ancient and old, but I don't think that they're dead. As I've said, we still call upon Inanna in many spiritual rituals. And in Maiden Circle, we still speak a Sumerian name for God. These religions, these gods, these deities may have rested, but what they stand for and what they are is not dead. And if we choose to give them energy and feed love into them and to call upon them, they will hear us, they will awaken, they will activate. If any of these names stuck out to you, please let me know in the comments. That was your fun fact of the day. Let's move on to our musing. So, numerology, what the heck is it? The way I've come to understand it is numerology is a way of understanding our universe through numbers, or seeing numbers as a code. As I said in our intro, I've always thought numbers were very special, and I've always understood them to be what our world is run on. Our computers, the way we build our homes, how we grow food, how we exist. All of it, at its core, is dependent on numbers. If the numbers are wrong, then things don't work. Machines don't work. Our computers don't work. I noticed very, very early on in school that if you understand the numbers, you can understand so much of everything else. If you understand the math of something, you can create a beautiful picture. especially at that age when I was doing a lot of activity workbooks and coloring books. There were these paint by number things. I'm sure we've all done them. And it always fascinated me to see how a grid, little square boxes, numbered boxes, could become these beautiful pictures. Or at least I thought they were beautiful. Then, as your education increases, you get into science, which of course relies on numbers and math. You get into singing and you're counting breaths, counting measures. You get into literature and you realize a haiku relies on numbers. It's structured in a numerical fashion. Take it further into life. Cooking, using recipes, usually there are measurements. Traveling a certain distance, the tools, the machines we use to travel, cars, airplanes, trains, boats. If the measurements are off when they're being built, if the numbers are wrong, they don't work. Our entire existence relies on numbers. And I have understood that for most of my life, even before I discovered numerology. Numerology itself is a very old practice. Going back to school a bit, we learned something in math eventually. Most of us, at least in America, have learned about the Pythagorean theorem. I've seen memes where people joke about how we had to learn the Pythagorean theorem, but we didn't learn how to balance our checkbooks, or we didn't learn how to cook or whatever. Although I actually did have classes that taught me both of those things. We still had a sort of home ec type of class when I was going to school in Mississippi. But generally, most of us don't use the Pythagorean theorem in our everyday lives. And a lot of us may not know where it comes from. We may have learned the theorem, and we may have even been told that Pythagoras was a mathematician, but then we didn't really learn much more about him. Pythagoras was indeed a mathematician, but he was also a philosopher. He saw an inherent connection between the natural world and numbers. He saw what I saw, that our universe relies on numbers, and that goes beyond the basics. What I mentioned, the standards, recipes, measurements, the math. Our universe, the physical world, and numbers are entwined in a spiritual way just as much as they are in a physical way. Some people consider Pythagoras the father of Western numerology. Others believe that numerology may have come way earlier from Egypt or civilizations in Babylonia. People in those ancient civilizations may have practiced something called Chaldean numerology, but there is evidence that different forms of numerology were practiced in places like Japan, China, and Rome. There are many different ways to practice and use numerology. According to GaneshaSpeaks.com, there are 4 predominant styles of numerology. The Chaldean numerology, as I mentioned, which is one of the oldest forms. The Kabbalah numerology, which comes from the Jewish-based practice of Kabbalah. You may have heard of that as it was made popular in the mainstream by the pop singer Madonna. Tamil numerology, which comes from the southern part of India. And of course, Western or Pythagorean numerology. You may meet numerologists who use one or any combination of these methods. I have seen a combination, and there is some overlap in the idea that the numbers typically are associated with letters. In some practices, they also use the birthday. This is especially helpful for people who are looking to grow their own inner understanding, to help with their journey of self-discovery. In fact, this is one of the ways numerology is most commonly used, to understand the individual. This is how I got into it a few years back. As I said, I'd always been kind of obsessed with numbers, and I was getting into tarot reading and oracle reading a lot more. You've heard about my tarot journey. So as I was getting into the journey, I would notice other readers mention numbers. And then I started seeing what we call angel numbers, which is a series of the same number repeated a few times. You may see something like 111, 222, 1111, 777, just these numbers that inspire us to be more aware. And I started wondering what these numbers could mean because I was seeing certain numbers at certain times. And I started seeing a number that is still very, very prominent in my life. And I started wondering why I was seeing it and why it would come at the time that it would come. And I still see it almost every day, not just on the clock, because obviously it's going to come up on the clock. Anything up to 555 will come on the clock. But I do see this number all the time, and it's comprised of numbers that I've always been very fond of. That's 13 and the number 3 by itself. Also the number 33. So I see 133 all the time. And I started really wondering what that was about. So I ended up buying a book. It's called The Complete Book of Numerology by David A. Phillips, PhD. And that's really where my journey into numerology began. Or I guess you could say it's always been there, but that's really where I started to actively dive into it. I have a digital copy of the book, and it is filled with all sorts of highlights and notes. And I also have a notebook, a little handwritten notebook that I've written as much as possible. It's full of numbers stuff. And I have entire pages for each number. It's information about the numbers themselves, and then I go into what the numbers mean when connected to the human personality or psychology. You get into numerology, you get into things like your life path number, your destiny number, your soul number, your heart number. I started making charts for me and all my friends to see what our strong suits were, and the numbers were always accurate. And that's the craziest thing. Numbers are not a matter of belief. They're not a matter of what we think. They simply are, and they simply carry the energy that they carry. And our stars, our universe, everything that we have uses that numerical code. And whether we see numbers as, 1, 2, 3, which is how we can conceptualize and understand them, or it's simply a sound of a few thumps, or, whatever it is, numbers are there. Every being counts in some way, and everything can be understood through numbers. There's a reason certain celebrities call upon 444, call upon the number 3. It really is a magic number, as Schoolhouse Rock told us. And numbers don't have to just be for understanding. They can also be used in magic. There is the knot spell, which is to tie 9 or 12 or however many knots as you chant a spell into string or rope. You can use a certain number of claps or ring a bell a certain number of times and incorporate the magic of that number into your spell, into your craft work. Each individual digit from 1 through 9 and also 0, which isn't technically a number, each digit holds a different vibration, a different energy, a different power, and different combinations of those digits can bring about different results and specific messages. Numbers are pretty dang cool. However you try to split it, you can't split it unless you're thinking fractions, unless you're using numbers. I encourage you to check out the book. I encourage you to look more into numerology and start with your own birth chart. Start with self-understanding, because the more we understand ourselves, the more we're able to understand other people, and the more we are able to understand the world around us. To know yourself is to know divinity. We've heard that phrase in many different ways from many different sources. And I do believe it's true. To know yourself is to know God. To know yourself is to know the universe. To know yourself is to know others. Because we are all a part of this same crystal. We are all faces of the same diamond. We all have the same root, the same core. We all bleed. We all cry. We all do things we don't want anyone to see or know about. We all smile. I hope we can all smile. So I encourage you to check out the Complete Book of Numerology, as well as looking into the Sumerian deities, because I think those are pretty cool too. Even the number 7 is a very special number to me, but also to a lot of people. It's lucky number 7, and it is that for a reason. There are those 7 main gods. My number 133 adds up to a 7. My own life path number combined with my favorite number, the magical number 3, comes out to a 7. I'm a life path number 4. Everything is connected in some way, and there is magic in everything, and if you can understand it and you can understand the numbers and you can see it for more than what it is on the surface, I do think your life would be made more full. It certainly made my life more full. So I suppose that's all I have to say about numerology and the numbers today. I am obviously no expert. I'm no expert on anything. I just come here and I share my thoughts with you. I hope you'll share your thoughts with me in the comments. Do you use numbers? Do you work with numerology? Do you just see the numbers of the universe? Are they everywhere for you like they are for me? If you try out the birth chart or use it to understand yourself, is it accurate? Let me know. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Let's move on to this episode's card reading. What is our message for this week? Please and thank you. We have the King of Swords. We have the Nine of Cups. We have the Hanging Man. It was actually in reverse. I don't usually read reversals, but somehow I've straightened my deck, but somehow he came out in reverse. And that's all we have here. On the bottom of the deck, we have the Three of Cups. So this week, I'm getting the message of some positive communication coming someone's way. There is possibly an expression of love. I'm seeing that you're reaching the end of a journey. So with the Nine of Cups, as I've said before, the digits go up 0 through 9, and then they start over at 1 with a 0. So you're at the end of a journey, and with the cups, which are about emotion, about love, about joy, and just looking at this particular card, there is a man offering his cup. He's holding his cup up, and he's got all these cups around him. He's got plenty to share. So there's this feeling of abundance, this feeling of something overflowing almost ready to overflow. And then I'm getting with this Hanging Man, because he came out in reverse. The Hanging Man usually represents waiting. It usually represents holding back. But because he came out in reverse, I'm seeing there is no more holding back. There is no more waiting. So something you have been waiting for, something you've been preparing for, it's now time for that to be expressed. Now time for that to come to fruition. With the King of Swords, that's where I'm getting the idea that it may be a communication. It may be you expressing yourself to someone, or expressing yourself in a way you haven't before that you've been really wanting to. Or maybe you'll be receiving a communication from someone who's been holding back and wanting to say something to you. I'm going to pull a few more cards to see if there's more for us. Is there more information for us? Is there more information, please and thank you? We have the Eight of Swords. We have the Hermit. We have the Seven of Pentacles. We have the Eight of Cups. And that's it. So we are bookended by these eights, and I do think that's for a reason. With the Eight of Swords, it's the message of you having been stuck. Again, with that Hanging Man energy that you may have been in, you weren't just waiting, you were stuck. You didn't feel like you could move forward. You felt like you were lost. You felt like you were alone. With this Hermit energy, you felt like you had to walk your path alone. You had to complete something on your own. And now we're entering the Seven of Pentacles, where you are seeing all the stuff that you went through. You're seeing what that's left you with, where you are now, what fruit you've grown. Again, there's that fruit again. I said something's coming into fruition, and then with the Seven of Pentacles, it's also the idea of have the seeds you planted borne fruit. And then it ends with the Eight of Cups, saying, okay, I've gotten what I need out of this, and now I'm leaving what I don't need behind. I'm leaving that trapped feeling behind, that Eight of Swords that was in my past. I'm no longer looking at it because it's no longer a factor. I'm no longer stuck. I'm no longer alone. I've gathered my fruit, and now I'm moving forward with what nourishes, what feeds me, what brings me love, what brings me passion, what brings me positivity, what brings me healing, what brings me growth. I'm moving forward through that dark time that I went through, away from that dark time that I've gone through. You've grown from this. With the Seven of Pentacles, it's not just what you've gotten out of it, but you've also grown internally, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. You've grown from this experience, from that Eight of Swords, from that feeling trapped, from that pain, from that loneliness, from that difficult journey that you've had to be on, from that holding back. You've learned something here. And we have some advice moving forward. We have Three of Wands. Again, we have an image of someone leaving something behind and looking towards hope, looking towards doves. There may even be something to do with boats, with water. So maybe you're traveling, maybe you're actually literally moving from one place to another. We have Three of Swords, another three here. So we have a very divine healing. We have on the bottom of the deck, I've shuffled this deck about 3 or 4 times now, and you guys have heard my shuffling. It's a lot. We have Three of Cups on the bottom of the deck. Once again, it was at the bottom of the deck when I pulled your first 3 cards, and now here it is again after pulling your last 2 cards. And we have the Three of Wands, the Three of Swords, and the Three of Cups here. This is divine. This is a divine change. This is divine healing. This is something that was so hard and so painful that you had to go through, and you have now seen joy. You have seen fruit. You have seen love in a very different way. You had to go through that thing, and I'm very sorry that you did. I'm very sorry that you experienced that darkness, but it has healed you. It has grown you. It has changed you. And your advice is to allow yourself to continue to change. With this Three of Cups, it's to celebrate, to pull yourself out of that hermit, lonely energy, and to open yourself up to sharing love with others. Open yourself up and let go of that heartache of the past. Let go of that betrayal, suffering, pain. Let it go. Or it's not even just about letting it go. It's letting it be. It has happened, it exists, and it may hurt sometimes. But you are such a fruitful, abundant, love-filled, and love-deserving person that your advice is to move towards that love, to move towards hope. As I mentioned, there is a dove on this Three of Wands, and the character on the card is facing the dove. He's facing the water. He's facing new horizons. There are 2 wands behind him, and he's only, again, like I said, he's only carrying 1 wand. He's carrying what has nourished him. He's carrying his passion. He's carrying what drives him, and he's leaving the rest behind. He's saying that heartache, that Three of Swords, that betrayal, that heartbreak, that darkness, that Eight of Swords, that loneliness, that feeling trapped. It's time to let it go. Just again, we have that Hanging Man. He's a number 12. That's the 12 card. 1 and 2 make 3. We have so many 3s here. With our 8 bookending that middle section, I feel like that's more saying this is the journey you've had to go on. You've been in sort of a box. You've been sort of trapped. But now you're free, and that's what 3 is. If you physically look at the number 3, it's like half of 8. It's like if you took an 8 and you cut it straight down the middle and you got rid of the back side. Now you just have that front side. You just have that 3. You've been opened up. You've been freed. You've been released. That is so beautiful. I love this. Oh my gosh. I pulled the Three of Cups off the deck. I brought it down to sit with the other cards, and underneath it we have the Empress. She is a number 3 card, so something divine is happening. 3 is the number of God. If you even look at Christianity, we have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And then in Wicca, we have the Mother, the Maiden, the Crone. We have the Father, the Warrior, the Sage. We have the Law of 3 that not everyone follows, but we do have it. 3 is such a magical, powerful number. I jokingly mentioned Schoolhouse Rock, but that is when I found how magical 3 could be. That is what I learned or started thinking about 3 as a magical number. Because it is. And you are entering such a magical phase in your life. I think your main advice right now is to believe, to have faith, to have hope, and to move towards that belief, move towards the light, move towards the hope. This is such a beautiful freaking reading. I'm so honored that I've pulled this message, that this has come forward for us this week. Thank you so much, whoever you are. Thank you, Divine. Thank you all for sharing this energy with me today. I feel so blessed to have shared this message. So that is our show, lovely souls. I am so grateful to be able to share this with you, and I do hope you've gotten something of value out of this episode. I certainly have. Again, I encourage you to look into the Sumerian gods and see if they resonate with you. Look into your own birth chart and the numbers surrounding your life and your personality and your being. And look towards the future with hope and love and faith, because something very beautiful is coming your way. So thank you again for listening, and until next time, I send you all the love in the world and so many blessings. Bye now.